The question of how to define a successful child is a pretty difficult one. I think I wrote a whole book called How Children Succeed, and I never actually defined success in that book. But what I think is that what we've been doing, especially over the past couple of decades, is defining success for children far too narrowly, simply as being about their scores on short-term tests of cognitive skills like math and literacy. Those skills certainly matter, but I think what scientists are discovering now is that the kind of skills that lead to long-term success in children, to them being happy, successful, motivated adults, involves this much broader set of skills. Things like resilience, grit, curiosity, things that are sometimes harder to measure, but seem to matter more in the long term. Grit is a word I think people have used for a long time, but as a psychological category, it's a pretty new invention, and it's the invention of this one researcher at the University of Pennsylvania, a woman named Angela Duckworth. And Angela defines grit as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. So the kids who have grit are the ones who have a dream or a goal that they embrace and stick with tenaciously for months or sometimes years. A lot of parents wonder how they can make their kids more gritty, and it's not easy. There's no simple curriculum for grit. There are no worksheets that make your kids more gritty. But I think that one of the things we can do is help kids figure out their own interests. I think there is a tendency among a lot of parents to try to schedule our kids to make sure they're doing soccer and piano and French and 100 other things at the same time, right? And that actually, I think, it can be helpful in lots of ways, but it doesn't help develop the sorts of passions that help kids express this grit. I think when we can give kids a little bit of room to figure out their own interests, to find their own passion, and then let them stick with that, that's sometimes hard to do because their passions are not necessarily our passions. But I think when we can get that right, we're actually helping them to develop that grit, and sending them the message that these passions are important. I think curiosity is a crucial part of learning for any child. I have a 5-year-old son, and he is the most curious creature I've encountered. I mean, his curiosity just motivates him every day, and I think it helps him learn, it helps him understand about the world, it helps him in school. My fear is that what we do in school often makes it harder for kids to express curiosity rather than easier. I don't think curiosity is really something that we need to teach kids. I think they have it naturally, but I think when we can let them express it and experience it, they're going to find their path in life, they're going to have experiences, they're going to learn things that they wouldn't otherwise. One of the words that I use in How Children Succeed is character, or character strengths. And it's a controversial word, and even for me, I sometimes have second thoughts about it. I think it's a useful way of talking about this set of skills, things like grit and resilience and curiosity and optimism that we know matter so much. But I think it's a word with some problems, and one of the problems in it is that I think a lot of us think about character as something that you're just born with or not, as traits that are just instilled in you at birth. But in fact, the educators who I write about in the book are talking about character in a very different way, as this set of skills that we can all practice and develop and learn. And I think in that context, character is the right word to use because it has a lot of depth to it. We know that it's something deep. But I think it's really important to emphasize when you're talking about character that we're talking about something that is malleable and is teachable and that we all need to help kids develop. The question of how to help kids develop these character strengths is still one we haven't entirely answered. There are no clear answers, I think, to how to help kids develop any particular character strength, but I think there are two things we know. One is in early childhood, it really helps when children have a nurturing, calm environment. When kids are surrounded by a lot of stress, it's difficult for them to develop these character strengths. When they have a close attachment with a parent or another caregiver, it's easier for them to develop these strengths. So the environment in which kids grow up is a critical part of it. But when we're talking about older kids, then I think what matters is the way that parents talk to their kids about these character strengths. I think at a certain age, kids become what we call metacognitive, where they can really start understanding their own thought processes. And it's at this point, I think, that talking to kids about this separate set of skills, explaining to them what grit and curiosity and self-control really mean, and helping them understand that these are things that they can develop, that's really helpful. And then the final thing that I'd emphasize is that helping kids develop what psychologists call a growth mindset is a really important way to help them develop these skills. And that comes a lot from how we talk to our kids, both about their successes and their failures. One of the things that Carol Dweck, the psychologist who writes about mindset, has said is that when kids are praised for their inherent traits, when a child does well on a math test and we just say, oh, you did great, you must be a genius, you're really good at math, you're a math person. All of those things, even though they sound like compliments, they are compliments. They are also instilling in kids the sense that you're either someone who's smart at something or you're not. You're a math person or you're not. You're a genius or you're not. And all of those things are actually very disabling for kids. They make children think that they can't change, that they can't grow. And so when we instead praise our children for their effort, when we say, oh, you got a good mark on that math test, it must mean you worked really hard at it. Isn't it amazing how you practiced and studied and your brain grew and you learned these new things? When we can use that kind of language, it makes a big difference in how kids develop both the growth mindset and then these sorts of skills. I think just about every successful person I can think of, both in my own life and in the public eye, is somebody who has developed and expressed a lot of these character strengths. I write in the book, for instance, about Steve Jobs, who was someone who experienced a lot of failure early on in his life, a lot of adversity. But I think partly because of those adversities, he developed a lot of these character strengths. He had enormous curiosity, interest in such a wide range of things, incredible amounts of grit and perseverance. He had a very clear vision for what he wanted his company and his products to be, and was able to keep that focus on for years and years, sometimes in the face of great obstacles. He was also really smart, there's no question about it, but I think what made a bigger difference in his success were those character strengths that helped him through, especially those difficult periods. One of the things that I found in my reporting is the importance of failure in success, sometimes a counterintuitive idea. But a lot of the educators who I spoke to said that part of the problem for a lot of young people, especially young people in more well-off communities and homes, is that they're prevented from failing. They're protected from failure by their families and by their schools and really by their whole culture. But failure is a crucial part of learning to succeed. Everybody fails at some point. And if we don't give kids an opportunity in childhood to learn how to manage failure, to learn that failure is something that is an essential and temporary step on a path to success, then we're really hampering them. If they don't learn that early on, then they get into adulthood, they encounter some setback, as everybody does, and they often completely fall apart.